Some of you know my wife, Sarah, and my brother, David. What you might not know is that they've been having an affair. Here are the pictures to prove it.
The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers and clattered onto the concrete floor of my garage. I was lying under the family truck, trying to fix what should have been a simple alternator problem, when I heard my daughter Bee's voice through the open window above. "Mom said what?" she whispered into her phone, thinking nobody could hear her. I stayed perfectly still under that truck, every muscle tensed. She said her and Uncle John are planning to walk into the reunion together, like some kind of power couple. She wants Dad to show up late so he won't mess up her big moment. Bee's voice cracked slightly. Lucy told her it would be perfect for her social media comeback. My hands clenched around the wrench handle. Social media comeback? From what exactly? I know it sounds weird, Bee continued, but Mom says Dad isn't really part of this family anymore anyway. She says he's just here, like a piece of furniture, like something you keep around because throwing it away seems like too much effort. I slid out from under that truck real slow, my work shirt soaked with sweat that had nothing to do with the August heat. Through the window, I could see Bee pacing in the kitchen, her phone pressed tight against her ear. She had her mother's blonde hair, but my stubborn chin. Right now, that chin was trembling. I don't know, Emma. It just feels wrong, like we're all pretending Dad doesn't exist. Welcome to my world, kiddo. I've been James Mitchell for 43 years, built Mitchell Electric from nothing but a beat-up van and a toolbox my father left me, turned it into the biggest electrical contractor in 3 counties, married my high school sweetheart Beth, raised 2 daughters, paid every bill on time, never missed a birthday or school play. And apparently, I'm just here. I walked into the house through the back door, my work boots leaving dusty prints on Beth's pristine white tiles. She'd had them installed last month, said the old ones made the place look working class. Funny thing about that, we are working class, or at least I am. Hey, Bee. I grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge. Who's on the phone? She jumped like I'd caught her stealing. Just Emma. We're talking about school stuff. School doesn't start for 2 weeks. College prep stuff. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I nodded and took a long drink of water, watching her squirm. Bee was 17, heading to state in the fall on an academic scholarship. She was the smart one. Her sister Bree, 15, had inherited her mother's talent for drama and her uncle's gift for getting other people to pay for things. Where's your mom? Shopping with Lucy. They went to the mall in Springfield. Springfield was 90 minutes away. Lot of effort for shopping when we had perfectly good stores right here in Millbrook. But then again, Beth had been making a lot of effort lately. New clothes, new haircut, new attitude. She'd started going to some fancy gym in the next town over, the kind with yoga classes and smoothie bars. She say when she'd be back? Bee shrugged. Late. Of course. These days, Beth was always running late, always busy, always somewhere else. We used to joke that I was married to my work. Turned out she was just waiting for her turn. I headed upstairs to shower, my mind chewing over what I'd heard. Beth and my brother John walking into the high school reunion together. Like a couple. Like they belonged together instead of him with his wife Carol and her with me. The hot water felt good on my shoulders, washing away the grime and sweat. I'd been working on the Hendricks job all week, rewiring their old farmhouse. Good honest work, the kind that builds something instead of tearing it down, the kind John never understood. My brother was 2 years older and had spent his whole life making sure everyone knew it. He'd gone to college, got himself a business degree, came back to town wearing suits and talking about maximizing potential. He worked at the bank now, approving loans and denying dreams with equal enthusiasm. John had always been the golden boy, star quarterback, prom king, the son who made our parents proud at church every Sunday. I was the one who got dirty, who fixed things when they broke, who kept the lights on while everyone else worried about looking good. But Beth used to see something in me that others missed. Used to. I got dressed in clean jeans and a polo shirt, not fancy, but respectable. Downstairs, B was gone, probably hiding in her room until the awkwardness passed. I stood in our living room, looking around at the life we'd built together. The furniture was new, stuff Beth had picked out over the past few months. Modern, she called it. Expensive, I called it. The old couch had been comfortable, broken in like a favorite pair of jeans. This new one looked like it belonged in a magazine. Nobody actually lived on it. Family photos lined the mantel, but I noticed something that made my stomach twist. The recent ones, the past year or so, I was missing from half of them. Beth and the girls at some restaurant, Beth and the girls at Bree's soccer game, Beth and the girls at the lake. When had I stopped being in the picture? My phone buzzed. Text from Beth. Running late. Don't wait up. It was barely 7 o'clock. I walked to the kitchen and opened the junk drawer where we kept important papers. Beth's phone bill was on top. She'd switched to her own plan last month, said it was easier for her business expenses. Beth didn't have a business, but I hadn't argued. The bill showed a lot of calls to numbers I didn't recognize. One number appeared more than the others, usually late at night or early in the morning. I pulled out my own phone and dialed it. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. You've reached John Mitchell with First National Bank. Please leave a message and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. My brother's voice, smooth and confident as always. I hung up without leaving a message. The house felt too quiet, too empty. I grabbed my keys and drove to Murphy's Tavern on Main Street. It was the kind of place where working men went to wash the day off their throats, where nobody cared if your shirt had wrinkles or your hands were stained with honest work. Carl Hendricks was sitting at the bar, nursing a beer and watching the Cubs game on the old television mounted in the corner. Carl owned the boxing gym above the hardware store and had been trying to get me to come around for years. James! He waved me over. How's that wiring job coming along? Finished today. Your house is ready for the next century. Good man. Buy you a drink? I ordered a beer and settled onto the stool next to him. The Cubs were losing, which seemed appropriate. You look like someone ran over your dog, Carl said. Don't have a dog. Maybe that's the problem. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the game and not talking about the things that were eating at us. Carl was a good friend, the kind who knew when to talk and when to just be present. He'd been a boxer in his younger days, fought professionally for a few years, before a bad shoulder ended his career. Now he trained kids and tried to keep them out of trouble. Beth coming to the reunion next week? He asked during a commercial break. Wouldn't miss it. The words came out more bitter than I intended. Carl gave me a sideways look. Everything all right at home? I took a long drink of beer, considering how much to say. Carl was trustworthy, but this was a small town. Words had a way of traveling. Things change, I said finally. They do. Question is whether you change with them or get left behind. What if you don't like the direction of the change? Carl turned to face me fully. Then you got two choices. Accept it or do something about it. And if doing something about it makes you the bad guy? James, I've been watching you for 20 years. You're one of the most decent men I know. Sometimes decent men get pushed too far. When that happens, the world better watch out. I finished my beer and left Carl with his wisdom and his losing baseball team. The drive home took me past John's house, a sprawling colonial in the fancy part of town where the doctors and lawyers lived. His BMW was in the driveway next to Carol's Mercedes. Perfect couple, perfect house, perfect life. Except John was calling my wife at midnight. Back home, Beth's car still wasn't in the driveway. I sat in my truck for a moment, looking at the house we'd bought 15 years ago when the business started taking off. It had needed work then. New roof, updated plumbing, modern electrical. I'd done most of it myself, working nights and weekends to turn it into something special. Beth had picked out paint colors and furniture, made it beautiful. We'd been a team then, building something together. Now it felt like a museum dedicated to a marriage that used to exist. I went inside and found Bea in the kitchen, making a sandwich. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Shoot." "Are you and Mom getting divorced?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. "What makes you ask that?" "You don't talk to each other anymore. She's never here. When she is here, you both act like you're walking on broken glass." Bea's eyes were bright with tears she was trying not to shed. "And all her friends keep giving me these weird looks, like they know something I don't." I sat down at the kitchen table, suddenly feeling every one of my 43 years. "Your mother and I are going through a rough patch. That doesn't mean we're giving up." "But you might?" "I don't know, honey. I honestly don't know." Bea nodded like she'd expected that answer. "For what it's worth, I think she's being stupid." "Don't talk about your mother that way." "Why not? She is being stupid. You're the best dad in the world, and she's treating you like you don't matter." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Thanks, kiddo. That means more than you know." "I love you, Dad. I love you too." After Bea went to bed, I sat in my recliner, the one piece of furniture Beth hadn't replaced, and tried to make sense of everything. My wife was having an affair with my brother. My daughter knew our marriage was falling apart. And somehow, I was supposed to pretend everything was normal at the high school reunion next week. Beth came home at 11:30, her cheeks flushed and her eyes bright. She smelled like expensive perfume and wine. "How was shopping?" I asked. "Fine. Lucy found a dress for the reunion. We ended up having dinner at that new Italian place." "Sounds nice." She kicked off her heels and headed for the stairs. "I'm exhausted. Don't stay up too late." "Beth?" She paused on the bottom step. "We should talk. Soon." "About what?" "About us. About what's happening to us." She sighed, suddenly looking tired. "James, I don't have the energy for this tonight." "When do you have the energy? Because it seems like you've got energy for everything else." "What's that supposed to mean?" I stood up, facing her across the living room that felt like a battlefield. "It means I know about the phone calls. I know about the late nights and the shopping trips and the new gym membership." Her face went pale. "I don't know what you think you know. I know my wife is lying to me. I know my brother is calling you at midnight. I know you're planning to walk into that reunion with him instead of me." Beth's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. For a moment I thought she might tell me the truth. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. "You're being paranoid, James, and frankly, it's not attractive." She went upstairs, leaving me standing in that perfect living room with its perfect furniture and its perfectly broken marriage. I walked to the front window and looked out at our street. Porch lights glowed like tired eyes, and somewhere in the distance, a dog was barking. Normal sounds from a normal neighborhood where normal people lived normal lives. But there was nothing normal about discovering your wife and brother were planning to humiliate you in front of the entire town. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number for Dave Morrison, a private investigator who'd done some work for my insurance company. Dave was discreet and thorough, and he owed me a favor from when I'd rewired his office for free. The call went to voicemail. I left a message asking him to call me back, then deleted the call from my phone's history. If Beth wanted to play games, I'd learn the rules, but I wouldn't be playing to lose. Dave Morrison called me back at 6 in the morning while I was drinking coffee and watching the sunrise through my kitchen window. I'd been awake since 4, my mind spinning like a hamster wheel. "James, got your message. You sounded stressed, buddy. What's going on?" I kept my voice low, even though Beth was still asleep upstairs. "I need you to follow someone. Discreetly." "Your wife?" Dave had been in the investigation business for 15 years. He could read between the lines better than most people could read actual lines. Maybe. I need to know where she goes, who she sees. I need proof of what I already suspect. This is gonna cost you, and it might hurt more than not knowing. I'll pay whatever it costs, and I'm already hurting. We arranged to meet at his office that afternoon. I hung up feeling like I'd crossed some invisible line. Yesterday, I was a husband with suspicions. Today, I was a husband hiring a private investigator. The transformation had begun. I got to the Hendricks farmhouse early, hoping work would distract me from the mess my personal life had become. The old place was beautiful in the morning light, with its wraparound porch and mature oak trees. Carl had hired me to bring the electrical system into the 21st century, and I'd been working on it for 2 weeks. "You're here early," Carl said, emerging from the house with a cup of coffee. "Couldn't sleep." "Woman troubles?" I connected a wire nut and tested the connection. Something like that. Carl studied my face with the same intensity he used to analyze his boxing students. "You know, when I was fighting professionally, I had this manager who used to cheat me out of my earnings. Skimmed money off the top, made side deals I didn't know about." "What did you do?" "First, I got proof. Then I got even, but I did it smart, not angry. Anger makes you stupid. Smart makes you dangerous." I nodded, filing away his advice. Carl had a way of saying exactly what I needed to hear. "You ever think about coming down to the gym? Might be good for you to hit something that can't hit back." "Maybe I will." The work went smoothly, and by noon I had the main panel upgraded and 3 rooms rewired. Physical labor had always been therapeutic for me, but today it wasn't enough to quiet my thoughts. I met Dave at his office above the pharmacy on Main Street. He was a thin man with observant eyes and the patient demeanor of someone who'd seen every kind of human weakness. "Tell me what you know," he said, pulling out a legal pad. I laid out everything: the phone calls, the late nights, Beth's sudden interest in her appearance, the reunion plan. Dave took notes and asked clarifying questions like a doctor diagnosing a disease. "I can have preliminary information for you in 48 hours, he said. "Photos, timeline, locations. You sure you want this?" "I'm sure." "What's your endgame here, James? You want to save the marriage or end it?" I thought about that for a long moment. "I want the truth. What happens after that depends on what the truth looks like." Dave nodded. "Fair enough. I'll be in touch." I drove home feeling like I was watching my life from outside my body. Everything looked the same: the streets, the houses, the familiar landmarks of a town I'd lived in my entire life. But something fundamental had shifted. Beth was in the kitchen when I arrived, preparing what looked like an elaborate dinner. She was wearing a new dress I didn't recognize and had spent time on her makeup. "You're cooking," I observed. "John and Carol are coming over. I thought it would be nice to have them for dinner." Of course. My cheating wife was cooking dinner for my cheating brother and his unsuspecting wife. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. "When did you arrange this?" "This morning. Carol called and suggested it." Another lie. Carol Mitchell was many things, but spontaneous wasn't one of them. She planned dinner parties weeks in advance and sent formal invitations. "I should shower and change," I said. "That would be good." Upstairs, I stood under the hot water and tried to prepare myself for an evening of pretending everything was normal. I'd been doing a lot of pretending lately, but tonight felt different. Tonight I'd be watching my wife and brother interact, looking for signs of their betrayal. I put on khakis and a button-down shirt, respectable, but not trying too hard. When I came back downstairs, Bea and Bree were setting the dining room table with our good china. "Why are we using the fancy plates?" Bree asked. "Because Uncle John is important," Beth said. "He deserves our best effort." I bit my tongue to keep from responding. John was important, but I wasn't. Got it. The doorbell rang at exactly 7 o'clock. John had always been punctual, a trait that served him well in banking. I opened the door to find my brother looking like he'd stepped out of a men's fashion magazine. Perfectly pressed shirt, expensive tie, shoes that probably cost more than most people made in a week. "James, good to see you, brother." He clapped me on the shoulder with the fake enthusiasm of a politician. Behind him, Carol smiled nervously. She was a small woman with kind eyes who'd never quite figured out how to handle John's oversized personality. "Come in," I said. "Beth's been cooking all afternoon." We gathered in the living room for drinks. John admired the new furniture while Carol complimented Beth's dress. I sat in my recliner and watched the performance, looking for cracks in the facade. They were subtle about it, I had to give them credit. No lingering glances, no inappropriate touches. But there was an energy between them, a current of awareness that shouldn't have existed between a man and his sister-in-law. "So, James," John said, swirling his whiskey, "how's business?" "Good. Steady." "That's the beauty of your line of work. People always need electricity." He made it sound quaint, like I was a blacksmith or a candle maker, some charming relic from a simpler time. "People always need money too," I replied. "Lucky for you." John laughed, but there was an edge to it. True enough. Though I prefer to think of myself as helping people achieve their dreams. By charging them interest? "James," Beth said sharply, "don't be rude." Rude. I was being rude for questioning my brother's business model while he was sleeping with my wife. Dinner was tense, despite Beth's efforts to keep conversation light. She'd made John's favorite meal, prime rib with all the fixings. I couldn't remember the last time she'd made my favorite anything. "This is delicious, Beth," Carol said. "You'll have to give me the recipe." "Oh, it's nothing special. Just something I threw together." Another lie. I'd seen the cookbook open on the counter, the ingredients carefully measured and prepared. This wasn't thrown together. It was orchestrated. "Beth's always been a wonderful cook," John said. "James is a lucky man." The way he said my name made it sound like a consolation prize. After dinner, we moved back to the living room. Carol and Beth discussed the reunion while John regaled us with stories from the bank. I nursed my beer and counted the minutes until they'd leave. "James, you're quiet tonight," Carol observed. "Everything all right?" "Just tired. Long day." "He's been working too hard," Beth said, but there was no concern in her voice. If anything, she sounded annoyed, like my fatigue was an inconvenience. "All work and no play," John said with a grin. "You should take a vacation, brother. Get away from it all." "Maybe I will." "You could go fishing up at the lake. Remember how we used to do that when we were kids?" I remembered. John would bring the expensive gear our father bought him, and I'd make do with a hand-me-down rod and whatever bait I could find. John would catch the bigger fish and make sure everyone knew about it. "Those were good times," I said. "We should do it again sometime. Just the two of us, like old times." Beth's face lit up at this suggestion. "That's a wonderful idea. You two should spend more time together." She wanted me gone. Wanted me out of the way so she and John could continue their affair without worrying about getting caught. They left around 10 o'clock, John shaking my hand with that same politician's grip, Carol hugging Beth goodbye. I watched from the window as they walked to John's BMW, noting how he opened the car door for Carol with practiced courtesy. "That was nice," Beth said, beginning to clear the glasses. "Very nice. John looks good, doesn't he? Success suits him." "He's always been successful, at least in his own mind." Beth frowned. "Why do you always do that?" "Do what?" "Tear him down. He's your brother, James. He loves you." I stared at her, wondering if she actually believed what she was saying or if she was just that good at lying to herself. "I'm going to bed," I said. "It's only 10:30. I'm tired." Upstairs, I lay in the dark, listening to Beth move around the house, cleaning up after her perfect dinner party. My phone buzzed with a text from Dave Morrison. "Preliminary surveillance begins tomorrow. We'll be in touch." I deleted the message and closed my eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. Instead, I found myself planning. If Dave confirmed what I suspected, I'd need to decide what to do with the information. I could confront them directly, but that would just lead to denials and accusations. I could file for divorce, but in a no-fault state like ours, adultery didn't matter much legally. Or I could get creative. The reunion was in 5 days. The whole town would be there, including everyone who'd known Beth and me since high school. Everyone who thought we were the perfect couple, the success story that proved love could last. What if they learned the truth? What if the perfect couple's perfect facade crumbled in front of everyone who mattered? I smiled in the darkness, feeling something cold and calculating settle into place where my broken heart used to be. Beth wanted to make an entrance at the reunion. I'd make sure it was memorable, for all the wrong reasons. Dave Morrison's first report arrived via email at 6:47 a.m. while I was drinking coffee in my truck outside the Henderson job site. I'd started leaving the house early to avoid the morning routine with Beth, the careful dance of two people pretending they still cared about each other. The photos were worse than I'd imagined. Beth and John at the Riverside Motel, 12 miles outside of town. Beth and John having lunch at Romano's, the expensive Italian place where we'd had our anniversary dinner 3 years running. Beth and John in his BMW, parked behind the old grain elevator where teenagers went to make out. My hands shook as I scrolled through the images. There was my wife of 19 years, laughing at something my brother was saying. There was my brother, his hand on my wife's thigh as they sat in his car. There they were, walking into that motel room like they owned the world. The timestamps showed they'd been meeting for at least 6 weeks. Regular as clockwork, every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon. While I was working to keep our family business profitable, they were working to destroy our family. My phone rang. Dave Morrison. You get the email? I got it. There's more. Financial records show your wife opened a new checking account last month. Your brother's been making deposits into it. Small amounts, nothing that would trigger attention, but steady. So John was paying her. My wife had become my brother's purchased companion. James, you still there? I'm here. What do you want me to do with this information? I stared at the photo on my phone screen. Beth and John kissing in the parking lot of the motel. They looked happy, carefree, like people who'd found something worth celebrating. Keep watching them. I want to know everything they do between now and Saturday night. The reunion? The reunion. I hung up and sat in my truck for another 10 minutes, letting the rage build inside me like pressure in a boiler. Then I got out and went to work, because that's what I did. I worked while other people played games, but I was done being the responsible one. Done being the man who fixed things while everyone else broke them. The Henderson job was a complete rewire of a 1920s colonial. The kind of meticulous work that required patience and precision. Perfect for a man who was planning something that required both qualities. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text from Beth. Having lunch with Lucy. Home late again tonight. I called Dave Morrison. Can you check something for me? My wife says she's having lunch with Lucy Patterson. I want to know if that's true. Give me an hour. An hour later. Your wife is at the Riverside Motel, room 127, same room as yesterday. I finished the Henderson job by 3 o'clock and drove to Murphy's Tavern. Carl was there, as usual, watching a baseball game and nursing a beer. You look like someone who needs to hit something, he said as I sat down. Maybe I do. Come on, let's go upstairs. Carl's boxing gym was a throwback to an earlier era. Heavy bags hung from chains, speed bags rattled like machine guns, and the smell of sweat and leather filled the air. A few teenagers were working out, throwing punches with the awkward enthusiasm of youth. Carl wrapped my hands and led me to a heavy bag in the corner. Don't think about technique, he said. Just hit it. I hit it, and hit it again, and again. Each punch carried the weight of 19 years of marriage. Each impact echoed with the sound of trust being shattered. I hit that bag until my shoulders burned and my lungs screamed for air. Better? Carl asked. Getting there. Good. Now let's work on your form. If you're gonna hit something, might as well do it right. We spent an hour working on basic combinations. Jab, cross, hook, uppercut. Simple movements that felt like prayers for the violent. You're a natural, Carl said as we unwrapped my hands. Good balance, decent power. You ever think about competing? I'm 43 years old. So, we got amateur leagues for older guys. Might be good for you. Maybe after I take care of some other business. Carl studied my face with those sharp eyes of his. Just remember what I told you about being smart instead of angry. I remember. I drove home, feeling cleaner somehow, like the physical exertion had burned away some of the poison in my system. But the clarity that remained was cold and sharp as a blade. Beth was in the kitchen when I arrived, preparing dinner with the same careful attention she'd shown the night John and Carol came over. How was your lunch with Lucy? I asked. Fine. We talked about the reunion. She's excited to see everyone. I'll bet she is. Beth looked at me strangely. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. Just making conversation. We ate dinner in silence, the girls chattering about school and friends while Beth and I performed our roles as functional parents. After the meal, I helped Bea with her college applications, while Beth disappeared into her room with her laptop. Around 10 o'clock, I knocked on our bedroom door. Come in. Beth was sitting up in bed, scrolling through social media on her phone. She'd changed into a nightgown I'd never seen before, something silky and expensive that probably came from one of her shopping trips with Lucy. We need to talk, I said. About what? I sat on the edge of the bed, close enough to see the guilt flicker across her face. About us. About what's happening to our marriage. James, I'm tired. I know about John. The words hung in the air between us like smoke from a fire. Beth's face went through a series of expressions, surprise, fear, defiance, and finally something that might have been relief. I don't know what you think you know, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. I pulled out my phone and showed her one of Dave's photos. Beth and John, kissing in the parking lot of the Riverside Motel. Her face crumpled. For a moment, she looked like the girl I'd married all those years ago, vulnerable and scared. James, How long? It's not what you think. How long, Beth? She closed her eyes. 2 months. Why? I don't know. It just happened. Things don't just happen. People make choices. She opened her eyes and looked at me with something that might have been pity. You wouldn't understand. Try me. Beth sighed and set her phone aside. When was the last time you really looked at me, James? Not just glanced up from your work or your television, but really looked at me. I look at you every day. No, you see me. There's a difference. You see the woman who cooks your meals and raises your children and keeps your house clean, but you don't see me. That's not true. When was the last time we went somewhere together? Just the two of us? When was the last time you told me I was beautiful? When was the last time you acted like you wanted to be married to me instead of just obligated to be? Her words hit harder than any punch I'd thrown at Carl's heavy bag. So you decided to sleep with my brother? I decided to feel alive again. John makes me feel special. He pays attention to me. He sees me as a woman, not just a wife and mother. He's married, Beth. He has a wife who loves him. Carol doesn't understand him the way I do. I stared at her, this woman I'd loved for more than half my life, and realized I was looking at a stranger. What happens now? I asked. I don't know. Are you in love with him? She hesitated just long enough to give me my answer. I think I am. I nodded and stood up. Okay. 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 I know where I stand now. James, wait. We should talk about this more. Figure out what to do. I know what I'm going to do. What? I looked down at her. sitting in our bed in her expensive nightgown, and felt something inside me crystallize into diamond-hard resolve. I'm going to the reunion on Saturday, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of woman I married. Beth's face went pale. You can't. Think about the girls. Think about your reputation. My reputation? You mean the reputation of the man whose wife is cheating on him with his own brother? That reputation? Please, James, we can work this out. We can go to counseling. No, we can't. You chose John. Now you get to live with the consequences of that choice. I walked to the door, then turned back. Oh, and Beth, pack a bag. I want you out of this house by tomorrow night. You can't throw me out. This is my home, too. Actually, I can. The house is in my name, bought with money from my business. Check the deed if you don't believe me. I left her sitting there and went downstairs to the kitchen. From the junk drawer, I pulled out the folder containing our important documents. Sure enough, the house deed was in my name only. I'd bought it before we were married and had never gotten around to adding her name. Sometimes procrastination paid off. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, planning my next moves. The reunion was in 3 days. I had 72 hours to orchestrate the perfect revenge. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Lucy. We need to talk. Interesting. Beth's best friend and confidant wanted to have a conversation. I texted back. When and where? Tomorrow. Murphy's Tavern, noon. I'll be there. I deleted the conversation and finished my coffee. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet, porch lights glowing like watchful eyes. Normal people living normal lives, going to bed with clear consciences and unbroken hearts. But I wasn't normal anymore. I was something else now, something harder and colder and infinitely more dangerous. I was a man with nothing left to lose, and that made me the most dangerous man in town. Lucy Patterson was already sitting in a corner booth when I arrived at Murphy's Tavern the next day. She looked nervous, her fingers wrapped around a coffee cup like it was an anchor in a storm. Lucy had been Beth's best friend since high school, a thin woman with sharp features and an even sharper tongue. She'd never married, claimed she was too independent for that kind of commitment. Now I wondered if she'd just never found a man willing to put up with her manipulation. James, she said, as I slid into the booth across from her. Thanks for coming. What do you want, Lucy? I want to help you. I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. Help me? You've been encouraging Beth's affair from the beginning. Lucy's face flushed. That's not true. Isn't it? All those shopping trips, all those girls' nights out. You've been providing cover for her and John. I tried to talk her out of it. Not very hard, apparently. Lucy leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. You don't understand. Beth isn't thinking clearly. She's having some kind of midlife crisis. She thinks John represents excitement, adventure, all the things she feels like she's missing. And you think I should just accept that? I think you should fight for your marriage. Why? So Beth can keep humiliating me while she figures out what she wants? Lucy's eyes filled with tears. Because I've seen what happens when marriages end badly. My parents went through a nasty divorce when I was 12. It destroyed our family. The kids never recover from that kind of poison. Maybe you should have thought about that before you helped my wife cheat. I made a mistake. I thought if I stayed close to her, I could influence her decisions. I thought I could get her to come to her senses. I studied Lucy's face, looking for signs of deception. She seemed genuinely upset, but Lucy had always been a good actress. What do you want from me? I asked. Don't humiliate her at the reunion. Don't destroy your family in public. Give me a chance to talk to her, to make her see reason. It's too late for that. It's not. She still loves you, James. She's just confused. She's in love with my brother. She thinks she is. There's a difference. I finished my coffee and stood up. Thanks for the advice, Lucy, but I've made my decision. Please, James. Think about Bea and Bree. They don't deserve to have their family destroyed because their mother made a stupid mistake. Their mother should have thought about that before she started sleeping with their uncle. I left Lucy sitting in that booth and drove to Dave Morrison's office. He had more photos, more evidence of Beth and John's affair. They'd been getting careless, meeting in public places, acting like a couple instead of hiding like cheaters. They're planning something for the reunion, Dave said, showing me pictures from the previous day. They met with a photographer at the high school gymnasium. Looked like they were planning some kind of photo session. A photo session? Yeah. The photographer was showing them different spots around the gym, talking about lighting and angles. Your wife was taking notes. So they were going to make it official. Present themselves as a couple at the reunion, probably with professional photos to commemorate the moment. I want you to be at the reunion, I told Dave. With your camera. I want documentation of everything that happens. What are you planning, James? Justice. I spent the rest of the day making preparations. First, I visited my lawyer, Tom Bradley, and filed for divorce. Tom was a good man who'd handled the legal work for my business for years. I'm sorry it's come to this, he said as I signed the papers. So am I. You want to try mediation first? Sometimes couples can work things out. Not this time. Tom nodded and put the papers in his safe. I'll file these on Monday. Beth will be served with papers by Tuesday. Good. Next, I stopped by the bank. Not John's bank. I wasn't stupid enough to give him advance warning. I went to the credit union across town and moved our joint savings account into my name only. It was perfectly legal since I was the primary account holder. Then I canceled Beth's credit cards. Again, perfectly legal since they were in my name and I was responsible for the payments. By the time I finished, Beth would have no access to money except whatever John was willing to give her. Let's see how much he really loved her when she became his financial responsibility. My final stop was the high school. The reunion committee was decorating the gymnasium, hanging streamers and setting up tables. I found Mary Henderson, the committee chairwoman, directing traffic with military precision. James, so good to see you. Are you excited about tomorrow night? Very excited. I was wondering if I could add something to the program. Of course. What did you have in mind? I'd like to give a speech about marriage, about the importance of family, about how the relationships we build in high school can last a lifetime. Mary's face lit up. That's perfect. You and Beth are such an inspiration to all of us, high school sweethearts who made it work. We certainly are. I'll put you on the program right after dinner, before the dancing starts. Will that work? That'll work perfectly. I drove home feeling like a general who'd positioned his troops for the decisive battle. Everything was in place. All that remained was the execution. Beth was waiting for me in the kitchen, her eyes red from crying. James, we need to talk. I thought we talked last night. I mean really talk. About our future, about the girls, about how we're going to handle this. I sat down across from her at the table where we'd shared thousands of meals over the years. What's to handle? You're in love with John. I'm filing for divorce. Seems pretty straightforward. It doesn't have to be this way. Yes, it does. You made your choice. I made a mistake. People make mistakes, James. It doesn't have to destroy everything we've built. Some mistakes are too big to forgive. Beth reached across the table and took my hand. Her touch used to comfort me, used to make everything seem possible. Now it just felt like another manipulation. I'll end it with John. We can start over, go to counseling, take a vacation together. We can fix this. Why? Because I love you. No, you don't. You love the security I provide. You love the life we've built. But you don't love me. That's not true. I pulled my hand away from hers. If you loved me, you wouldn't have slept with my brother. If you loved me, you wouldn't have humiliated me in front of the whole town. If you loved me, You would have talked to me about whatever problems you were having instead of running to John. I tried to talk to you. You were always working. I was working to provide for this family, to give you and the girls everything you wanted. We didn't want things, James. We wanted you. Well, now you don't have to worry about that anymore. I stood up and headed for the door. Where are you going? Out. James, please, don't leave like this. I'm not leaving, Beth. You already left. I'm just making it official. I spent the evening at Carl's gym, working out my frustrations on the heavy bag. Carl watched me with those knowing eyes of his, saying nothing but understanding everything. You ready for tomorrow? He asked as I unwrapped my hands. I'm ready. Remember what I told you about being smart? I remember. Good, because once you cross certain lines, there's no going back. I crossed that line the day I found out about Beth and John. Tomorrow, I'm just making sure everyone else knows where it is. I went home to find Beth packing a suitcase. She looked up when I entered our bedroom, her eyes hopeful. I'm going to stay at Lucy's for a few days. Give us both some space to think. Good idea. Maybe after the reunion, we can sit down and really talk about our future. Maybe. But we both knew there wouldn't be any talking after the reunion. After tomorrow night, there wouldn't be anything left to discuss. Beth finished packing and carried her suitcase downstairs. I followed her to the door, playing the role of the concerned husband one last time. Beth? She turned, hope flickering in her eyes. I hope you and John will be very happy together. The hope died, replaced by something that looked like fear. What are you going to do tomorrow night? I'm going to give a speech about marriage, about the importance of honesty and fidelity and keeping the promises we make. James, don't. Please. Don't what? Tell the truth? Don't destroy us in front of everyone we know. I opened the door for her. You already did that, Beth. I'm just going to make sure everyone gets to see the wreckage. She left without another word, her taillights disappearing into the darkness. I stood in the doorway for a long time, breathing in the cool night air and thinking about what tomorrow would bring. Upstairs, Bea was waiting for me. Is Mom really gone? For now. Are you getting divorced? Probably. Bea nodded, like she'd expected that answer. What about the reunion tomorrow? What about it? Are you going to do something terrible? I looked at my daughter, this young woman who was smart enough to see the storm coming. I'm going to do something necessary. That's not the same thing. Sometimes it is. Bea hugged me, and I held her tight, breathing in the scent of her shampoo and wishing I could protect her from what was coming. I love you, Dad. I love you too, kiddo. No matter what happens tomorrow night, remember that. I will. After Bea went to bed, I sat in my recliner and went over my plan one more time. Everything was in place. The speech was written, the evidence was compiled, and Dave Morrison would be there to document the aftermath. Tomorrow night, the whole town would learn the truth about Beth and John. They'd see what happened when people broke their promises and betrayed the ones who loved them. It was going to be ugly. It was going to be painful. It was going to destroy relationships and shatter illusions. But it was going to be justice. And after 19 years of being the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who fixed everyone else's problems, I was finally going to be the one who broke something. I was going to break them. The Millbrook High School gymnasium had been transformed into something resembling elegance, though you could still smell the faint odor of teenage sweat and floor wax underneath the decorations. Red and gold streamers hung from the rafters, and round tables covered with white tablecloths filled the space where we used to play basketball and suffer through mandatory physical education. I arrived early, wearing my best suit and carrying a manila folder containing everything I needed for the evening's entertainment. Dave Morrison was already there, positioned near the back wall with his camera, looking like any other reunion attendee capturing memories. Mary Henderson rushed over to greet me, her face flushed with the excitement of someone who'd spent months planning this event. James, you look wonderful. Is Beth here yet? She'll be along. I'm so excited about your speech. Everyone's talking about it. The Mitchells, our golden couple, sharing their secrets for a lasting marriage. It should be memorable. People began filtering in around 6 o'clock, faces I'd known since childhood now marked by 25 years of living. Some had aged gracefully, others looked like they'd been through a war. A few had clearly won the lottery of genetics and good fortune. I worked the room like a politician, shaking hands and making small talk, all while keeping one eye on the entrance. Beth and John would make their grand entrance soon, probably timed for maximum impact. James Mitchell! I turned to see Tommy Brennan, my old lab partner from chemistry class. He'd put on about 50 pounds and lost most of his hair, but his grin was the same. Tommy, good to see you. Man, you look exactly the same. What's your secret? Clean living and honest work. We chatted for a few minutes about our respective businesses. Tommy sold insurance now, before he moved on to corner someone else. I continued my circuit of the room, playing the role of the successful local businessman everyone remembered. At 7:15, they made their entrance. Beth walked through the gymnasium doors wearing a dress I'd never seen before, something red and expensive that hugged her figure and announced her presence to everyone in the room. She looked beautiful, confident, like a woman who'd finally found her place in the world. John was beside her, not quite holding her hand, but close enough that their connection was obvious to anyone paying attention. He wore a tuxedo that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payment. They moved through the crowd like royalty, accepting greetings and compliments with practiced grace. Beth laughed at something John said, the sound carrying across the gymnasium like music. They looked happy. They looked like they belonged together. They looked like they were about to have the worst night of their lives. Dinner was served at 8 o'clock, rubber chicken and overcooked vegetables that reminded everyone why they'd hated school cafeteria food. I sat at a table near the front with some old friends, making conversation while watching Beth and John hold court at their table across the room. You're quiet tonight, observed Janet Kowalski, who'd been student council president and was now a real estate agent. Everything okay? Just thinking about my speech. I can't wait to hear it. You and Beth are such an inspiration to all of us divorced folks. We try our best. At 9 o'clock, Mary Henderson approached the microphone that had been set up near the DJ's station. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please. The crowd gradually quieted, conversations trailing off as people turned toward the front of the room. We have a very special treat tonight. James Mitchell, one of our most successful graduates and half of our favorite couple, has agreed to share some thoughts about marriage and lasting love. Please give him a warm welcome. Applause filled the gymnasium as I stood and made my way to the microphone. I could see Beth's face from the podium, her expression shifting from confusion to concern as she realized what was happening. I pulled my speech from the manila folder and set it on the podium, then looked out at the sea of faces. People I'd grown up with, people who'd known me since I was 17 years old, and thought I knew everything about life. Thank you, Mary. And thank you all for being here tonight. More applause. I waited for it to die down before continuing. When Mary asked me to speak about marriage tonight, I have to admit I was hesitant. What could I possibly tell you about love and commitment that you don't already know? A few chuckles from the audience. Beth was watching me intently now, her face pale. But then I realized that maybe my experience could be useful. Maybe by sharing what I've learned over 19 years of marriage, I could help some of you avoid the mistakes that can destroy a relationship. I paused, letting my eyes sweep across the room before settling on Beth and John's table. You see, I used to believe that marriage was about trust, about two people making promises to each other and keeping those promises no matter what challenges life threw at them. John was leaning forward now, his face tight with concern. I believed that when you stood in front of your family and friends and God and promised to love, honor, and cherish someone, Those words meant something, that they were sacred. My voice carried clearly through the gymnasium, amplified by the sound system and the absolute silence of the audience. I believed that when you promised to forsake all others, you meant it. That your marriage vows weren't just pretty words you said to make the ceremony more meaningful. Beth started to stand, but John grabbed her arm, pulling her back down. They were trapped now, unable to leave without causing a scene. But I've learned something important over the past few months. I've learned that some people view marriage vows as suggestions rather than commitments, guidelines that can be ignored when something more exciting comes along. A murmur ran through the crowd. People were starting to understand that this wasn't going to be the inspirational speech they'd expected. I've learned that the woman you love, the woman you've built a life with, the woman you've worked every day to provide for and protect, can decide that those vows don't apply to her anymore. Beth's face was white now, her hands gripping the edge of the table. I've learned that your own brother, the man who stood beside you at your wedding, who ate at your table and played with your children, can decide that your marriage vows don't apply to him either. The gymnasium was completely silent now, except for the sound of my voice and the whisper of the ventilation system. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the real golden couple of our class, my wife Beth and my brother John, who've been conducting an affair for the past 2 months. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Gasps, exclamations, the scrape of chairs as people turned to look at Beth and John's table. Someone dropped a glass, the sound of shattering crystal cutting through the chaos. Beth shot to her feet, her face blazing with humiliation and rage. "James, stop this!" But I wasn't finished. They meet every Tuesday and Thursday at the Riverside Motel, room 127, if anyone's interested. John's been paying her for her services, small deposits into a private account she opened last month. John stood up, his face purple with fury. "You're lying!" I reached into my manila folder and pulled out a stack of photographs, holding them up for everyone to see. These were taken by a private investigator over the past week. Would you like me to pass them around so everyone can see how much you two love each other? The crowd erupted. People were shouting, standing up, pointing at Beth and John. Someone was crying, probably Carol, though I couldn't see her from the podium. "James Mitchell, you stop this right now!" Mary Henderson was rushing toward the microphone, her face horrified. But I stepped away from the podium, my work finished. I'd said everything I needed to say. Beth was pushing through the crowd, trying to reach me, tears streaming down her face. "How could you do this? How could you humiliate me like this?" "I didn't humiliate you, Beth. You humiliated yourself. I just made sure everyone got to see it." John appeared beside her, his expensive tuxedo rumpled, his perfect hair disheveled. "You're going to pay for this, brother." "Am I? What are you going to do, John? Foreclose on my business? Good luck with that. I don't owe your bank a dime." "You've destroyed everything." "No, you destroyed everything. I just cleaned up the mess." Security guards, probably volunteer fathers pressed into service, were moving toward us, trying to restore order. But the damage was done. The secret was out, spread through the crowd like wildfire. I could see Dave Morrison near the back wall, his camera capturing everything. Tomorrow, there would be photos of this moment, documentation of Beth and John's public disgrace. "Ladies and gentlemen," I called out, my voice carrying over the chaos without the microphone. "I hope you've enjoyed tonight's entertainment. Consider it a public service announcement about the importance of keeping your promises." I walked toward the exit, the crowd parting before me like water. Behind me, I could hear Beth sobbing, John shouting, Mary Henderson trying to restore order to her ruined reunion. Outside, the parking lot was quiet and cool. I loosened my tie and took a deep breath of fresh air, feeling lighter than I had in months. My phone buzzed with a text from B. "Dad, are you okay? Someone posted a video on social media." I typed back, "I'm fine, home soon." Dave Morrison appeared beside me, his camera bag slung over his shoulder. "Well, that was something," he said. "Did you get everything?" "Every moment. You want copies of the photos? Send them to my lawyer. He'll know what to do with them." Dave nodded and walked away, leaving me alone in the parking lot. Through the gymnasium windows, I could see people still milling around, probably discussing what they'd just witnessed. Tomorrow, the whole town would be talking about it. By Monday, it would be regional news. The Mitchell family scandal would be the most interesting thing to happen in Millbrook in years. I got in my truck and drove home through the quiet streets of my hometown. The house was dark except for the porch light I'd left on. Inside, Bea was waiting for me in the living room, her laptop open on the coffee table. "Dad, there are already 3 different videos on Facebook, and someone started a hashtag on Twitter, Mitchell Reunion Meltdown." "How do I look?" "Like someone who just dropped a nuclear weapon on his own life." I sat down beside her on the couch. "Any regrets?" Bea considered the question seriously. "About Mom and Uncle John?" "No. They deserved what they got. About doing it so publicly? Maybe. Sometimes public problems require public solutions." "What happens now?" "Now we rebuild. Just you, me, and Bree. We figure out how to be a family without the people who didn't want to be part of it anymore." "Will Mom try to come back?" "Probably, but it's too late for that." Bea closed her laptop and leaned against me. "I'm proud of you, Dad, for standing up for yourself, for not just letting them get away with it. Even though I embarrassed the whole family, they embarrassed the family. You just made sure everyone knew about it." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, father and daughter in the ruins of what used to be our normal life. My phone rang, Beth's number. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again, John's number, voicemail. It rang a 3rd time, Lucy Patterson. I answered that one. "James, what have you done? What needed to be done? You've destroyed them, both of them, their reputations, their careers, their marriages." "They destroyed themselves. I just provided the lighting." "Carol's in the hospital. She collapsed when she saw the photos." I felt a stab of guilt about that. Carol was innocent in all this, a good woman who'd been betrayed just like I had. "I'm sorry about Carol, but that's John's responsibility now, not mine." "You're a monster, James Mitchell." "Maybe I am, but I'm a monster who keeps his promises." I hung up and turned off my phone. Outside, a car drove slowly past our house, probably someone hoping to catch a glimpse of the man who'd just become the most talked-about person in town. "Dad?" Bea said quietly. "Yeah? Was it worth it?" I thought about that question, really considered it. Was destroying my wife and brother in front of everyone we'd ever known worth the satisfaction of revenge? "Ask me in a year," I said finally. "Okay, I will." We sat there together in the quiet house, surrounded by the wreckage of our old life and the uncertain promise of whatever came next. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and reporters and probably more confrontations with Beth and John. There would be consequences I hadn't considered, complications I hadn't planned for, but tonight, for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. Tonight, the truth was finally out in the open where everyone could see it. And sometimes, that's all the victory a man needs.